Any good stories from the road?
Pipe up.
I wish we'd gotten seen a little bit more out of our punter.
I'm starting to puke.
It makes my stomach hurt.
I thought he was going to die.
I'm starting to throw up in my mouth a little bit.
He's on the probiotics.
Is Georgia playing the 1985 Bears this weekend or what?
A lot of Todd talk.
Rat poison proof.
They're mongoose.
We will not be hunted at the University of Georgia. I can promise you that. The hunting that we do will be done from us going the other direction.
Welcome to the Georgia-Florida show this week, guys. It is always a big deal. Dogs, Gators, doesn't matter if the Dogs are historically huge favorites or not. We'll get into that. We'll get into a new Georgia commitment and all things Dogs as the end of that Georgia bye week comes to an end. Jake Rowe, fresh off of the hayride. I'm sure he picked a few prize-winning pumpkins at the Fall Festival. Palmer Toms played 800 holes of golf over the week, so we're ready to get back into it, guys.
I know I'm ready for a game. I watched bits and pieces. I had a little get together at my house on Saturday, and somebody kept turning the TV off. It made me angry. I was wondering. I was like, man, come on, guys! Now we got to quit turning this television off. There's college football on. I cooked this food. We're leaving the TV on, so you guys can chill out.
What did y'all think about the weekend's games? I didn't catch much of it either, to be honest.
I got to watch a little bit of the end of LSU and Ole Miss, and boy, oh boy, did LSU kind of get wild on them there at the end. I watched a little bit of that Alabama-Mississippi State game, watched a little bit of the Oregon UCLA game. You know, I thought in a lot of ways, most instances, the favorites just kind of, you know, put their foot down most of the time. I mean, you had that Clemson-Syracuse thing. All I know is I went 4-0 this week. So
I went 0-4. So congrats to you.
Yeah,
I think I went 2-2, right there in the middle.
Yeah, we had a 4-0, 2 2-2s, and 1-0-4.
The LSU thing it surprised me. It surprised me to see LSU as favorites to begin with, and then to see the final score was even more shocking. I mean, I have not been able to figure out Brian Kelly's Tiger family all season, but it looks like they're figuring things out.
Family.
Yeah, I was like Jake, got to catch a little bit of those marquee matchups, Syracuse, Clemson, some of that game. Ole Miss, LSU, flipped back and forth between that and Oregon, UCLA, catching some of that in between golf and going to the beach. Came back, watched the end of Oklahoma State, Texas, watched the beginning of that Alabama, Mississippi State beatdown, and, caught bits and pieces, kept up with it. One thing I do know coming out of this weekend, that the Georgia's wins are looking a lot better.
Yeah.
Oregon, South Carolina, both undefeated since playing Georgia. Both have been rolling. And so, Shane Beamer's got those boys playing good football. Dan Lanning's got those boys playing good football. 2 top 25 teams now. That schedule that a lot of people have harped on being not all that great, looking a lot better now.
Our comment section, great as well. It's elite. Uncle Glenn Hartley says time to take down the Gators. Andy Stowe says LSU is going to beat Bama. We'll see about that. If LSU can stay consistent, I think that could happen, but we will see. Matthew C says, let's get Florida hate week started the right way. You know what those letters mean if you're a Georgia fan. And Mean Muggin' Mutt, I guess, bagged a trophy buck over the weekend, I'm assuming here. Yeah, guys, when you look at Georgia this week, though, I don't care that Georgia's 22-point favorites. The biggest since 95, I think I read today. We've seen some weird things happen in Jacksonville, and I don't know if this is necessarily the year for it, but Kirby Smart had to address, hey, are you worried about your team looking past the Gators before you play Tennessee? And I think it's a legitimate question. I think it's kind of a crazy circumstance that even leads us to ask it. But what are y'all's expectations for how Georgia is going to come out of this bye week, knowing what you know about the team so far?
Well, I mean, I watched them come out of a bye last year and probably play as sloppy in the first quarter as they had played to that point maybe in the entire season. So I don't necessarily know that you can just assume that they're going to come out cracking out of the bye week. Now, I will say this. They went in with some momentum. I expect them to come out with the same momentum, and I still completely expect Georgia to be healthier. I think they're at least going to get Smile Munden back. I still think Jalen Carter's got a good chance to come back. Also still believe that that A.D. Mitchell is kind of there on the cusp as well. But it's hard to say you expect them to come out with their hair on fire or anything like that, because I know they'll be preaching that whole composure and that type
physicality,
of
toughness.
Yeah, physicality, toughness, composure, yada yada yada. But I do expect them to come out and be more healthy, and to at the very least kind of match what they went in with, which was a pretty focused effort against Vanderbilt.
What's up, Jake? Welcome into the show, man. We're just kind of looking.
I'm over here tweeting the link out right now, so I was a little distracted.
Oh no, I appreciate that. When you look at this Georgia team, Jake, and we were talking about Georgia's strength of schedule, as far as the playoff committee is concerned, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's what they really like to look at, is the strength of schedule. And Georgia handles its business against Florida. Tennessee handles its business against Kentucky. I still wonder, what the committee might say about it, but not to get too far ahead of ourselves. Jake Roos, some big news today. We'll just start right there. I mean, that's the most newsworthy thing, is the commitment of Chris Peal, 4-star 2023 cornerback. Tell us about this kid and why Georgia loved him so much.
Well, you got to go back to Fran Brown on this one. I think that's really the key component here. Fran was on him at Rutgers and then transitioned that over to Georgia. And since he arrived on the staff, has made this kid a major priority. Out of Providence Day School up there in Charlotte, one of the top premier programs in the state. And, they love this kid for all the reasons you might expect. I mean, he's a total package. I went and watched the film on this guy. 6'1", 190 pounds, plays physically for the position, has great speed, plays both ways on the team. It has really effective on the offensive side as he is on the defensive side. Great ups, really active hands, big football IQ as well. So I liked everything that I saw on tape for sure. Understand why Georgia prioritized him so highly. Michigan probably hurt to lose that one. South Carolina felt like they were maybe in it a little bit as well. But this was a big get for Georgia, a guy that they'd spent a lot of time and resources on. I really think they have to be happy with the addition of Chris Peal in this 2023 class.
What's the story on Fran Brown? I mean, we raved about him this offseason when Georgia hired him and everything he was bringing to the job. But it seems like he's really fitting in well with Georgia's staff, and he was a great recruiter at Rutgers, and he's not really missing a beat. What makes him tick?
The kids, I think, feel like he's just really relatable. I mean, he's a young guy. He's a guy who is, relentless in his recruiting, and he's unafraid. And that's the coolest thing about him, I think. I mean, this guy was a guy from Rutgers, all right? So we're talking New Jersey, dip it into South Florida. And I talked to a couple coaches down there who said, this kid has connected with our kids, and it's about authenticity. When you're talking about Fran Brown, he's really stood out to our guys because of the way that he connects, the way that he cares about them. And, that's something that pays a lot of dividends. Georgia was searching for a presence in South Florida after James Coley left. And I think this is the kind of guy that you have to get who can get down there and connect with those coaches, those programs, and these high-level players. And I think that he's able to go down there and get a guy like Daniel Harris to commit to the Dogs. I think that Georgia has a bright future down there, but also just a bright future at that cornerback spot because Fran Brown's the guy heading it up.
You can watch the highlights on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on our podcast platforms, be sure to check out DawgsHQ.com. There's a lot on Chris Peal for free. We got a link to his huddle highlights that Jake Rowe put together, but there's also some premium stuff that you can still access for 1 year for $1. Got a couple questions coming in here. SWGAEUC. Not sure what that stands for, but
Southwest Georgia. I don't know what the other part
I don't know what the EUC is. He's asking, is that 6 cornerbacks in the class?
It's 6 defensive backs for sure. I think that they've really prioritized that in this group. And listen, I think it's fair to say that Kirby's going to continue to do that moving forward. I think that, he understands the value with everybody moving toward these pass first offenses that, the secondary brings. And so you better have the best of the best. Janelle Aguero, more of a safety type back there. So I don't think you got to worry about him. And then looking around at this group, you got to think that maybe there's one of these guys who possibly transitions over to safety. I know Charles Power, the director of rankings and scouting over on 3, has said, maybe AJ Harris takes that route. And, I don't know that that'll be the case, but it's been mentioned. And I think with at least one of these guys, they probably trend toward a safety. Georgia is going to, like I said, recruit the best of the best. If 6 corners is what can help them and they feel like all 6 of those guys can play, they'll bring them in. They'll let practice sort it out. If some of them need to leave and find greener pastures, then that's fine too. But they're going to go ahead and keep this defensive back room stocked for sure.
One last question before we move on to the game at hand. Uncle Glenn Hartley asking if Moore is a flip watch, and some other questions coming in wondering, any Georgia DBs on transfer alert because of all the DBs that Georgia seems interested in taking in this cycle. I mean, it's the reality of college football right now. I think anybody could theoretically be a transfer alert, but the cream just continues to rise to the crop. Do you see any issues there, or anyone that may be on the outside looking in at first glance right now?
Issues are inevitable. I mean, it's like you said, Wes, that's just how the game goes. And so, guys are probably going to be considering all options. I certainly haven't heard anything that makes me feel that way. And the great thing about what Georgia does back there is they rotate a lot of guys in. So you've seen a lot of Dalen Everett this year. You've seen a pretty fair amount of Jaheim Singletary in the instances that you would expect to. Maybe Julian Humphrey's a guy you'd like to see a little bit more of. That's possible, I guess. Ja'Cory Thomas is somebody I would like to see moving forward. I don't know if we'll get the chance to see that. But I don't know that it's necessarily anything immediate. I'm not worried about any of those guys off of the bat. I think that Georgia recruits guys who understand kind of what they're up against and, that opportunity that can come if you're able to break through. Julian Humphrey is a guy who definitely stands out to me in that way. I think that he's a good player and a guy who is probably willing to wait his turn.
Fast as hell.
Everything we've heard about him. Yeah, fast as all get out. No question about it.
Palmer and Rowe, you guys have been keeping track of Georgia's freshman snap counts and everything this season. And like Jake Roos mentioned, the rotation in Georgia's defensive secondary. How do you expect Georgia could use not just Peel, but any one of these guys moving forward based on how you've seen the evolution of Kirby Smart's defense now that he has been able to stack these super deep secondaries in this program?
Well, you also have to recruit for different positions, and I'm sure that that's something they're doing. They recruit guys I think they know that can help them out in dime, that can help them out in nickel at that star position. And then, they obviously want depth, and then they haven't been above playing 3 guys at corner. I mean, they did it a couple, 2 or 3 years ago with Eric Stokes and DJ Daniel and Tyson Campbell. They're doing it a tad bit now with Dalen Everett working there in at corner with Kamari Lassiter. And it's almost like they've got a little Rolling Thunder type deal going with their cornerback position where, they say goodbye to one and then they bring one in and they're not really having to replace 2 at the same time. I guess they had to do that last year a little bit, and they had Darian Kendrick to kind of come in and save the day there. But I think more than anything, you just get as many big, long, fast guys in there. You get them to compete. The ones that can't compete or the ones that don't win a job, you try to maybe find a role for them and get as many of those guys in house as you possibly can, because the transfer portal is going to take them whether you've got 4 extra or 2 extra guys back there. And Georgia had that happen with Tyreek Stevenson. Got hit really hard in the secondary there, for a whole cycle by the transfer portal. So I think you just got to go in and get as many of those big, fast guys as you can possibly get.
Yeah, those guys are your special teams aces in a lot of cases. I mean, you're talking about guys who are, in a lot of cases 6 foot or better, 190 pounds or better with a lot of speed and a lot of field awareness. I mean, those guys and track speed a lot of times in your defensive backs. Those guys can get down there and make a tackle on the on that side of the special teams for sure. It's just never a bad thing, and so they understand the importance. And I think that of all the positions on the field, if Kirby has extra spots ever, if it's felt like it's trended towards spinning toward defensive backs.
Yeah, and like Rose said, with these defensive backs, that you've got multiple positions. You really have 3 positions in the secondary that Georgia has. They treat star as a separate position. They work with the safeties, they work with the corners some. And so you're pulling from a pool of guys that are being recruited to play safety, to play corner. You want to bring in as many of those guys as possible. Javon Bullard was a corner coming out of high school. Was very much recruited in that corner class, considered part of a corner in his recruiting class. He's not playing true corner for Georgia. So you want to bring in, like Roos said, long, fast guys that you can, have on your special teams, have on your depth chart. And looking at Georgia, I mean, I do think it would not surprise me if somebody were to transfer, but they don't have a ton of guys at corner already. They really don't have a ton of depth in this secondary as a whole. Routinely, they are taking fewer guys on road trips than I've seen before. We've seen Darius Smith working with the secondary, somebody that was recruited to play outside linebacker that probably is more of an outside linebacker edge rusher than he is a player in the secondary. So Georgia needs these guys in the secondary. They're going to lose a couple, not a surprise, but they're also going to lose some to the NFL. They may lose some to the transfer portal, but they certainly need to be bringing them in and refilling that room constantly.
Let Darius Smith play safety, you cowards. give that 6 foot giant, give that 6'5" giant just running his track winning 400 meter times. Let him play safety back there in the deep field for you. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Not only is it Kirby Smart's forte, but looking at the offenses that Georgia has to defend against, especially the one coming up in a couple weeks, that's what you got to just stack it up. And that's what Kirby loves to do. Let's look at Georgia and Florida this week, guys. What can Florida do? Can Florida win this game? And if they do win it, what's going to have to happen?
I don't let Roe just pointed this way, and I don't even know what he was doing. just tossing it. You're muted. Now you're muted.
He doesn't even want to talk about it.
He doesn't even want to talk about that.
I do. I was working on something real quick, so I was trying to. I should have been pointing to this guy right here.
I'll be honest. I haven't done a ton of digging into Florida. Ready to do a little bit of it this week. Really haven't watched a ton of their games this year. Don't know a ton about this team. So, based on what I've seen and the general expectation, no, I'm not expecting Florida to win this game. Could they win it? Yeah, it's a rivalry game. I think that you have to always consider that the emotional side of this game. So, do I think they could win it? Yes. Do I think they will win it? No. And the reasoning behind that, I'll further develop that this week.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just chomping at the bit because we haven't talked about a game in a few days. But the peanut gallery has definitely weighed in. This is Florida's Super Bowl. Mean Mug and Mutt says.
No question.
Lee Munger says it's a very questionable might. And Georgia would need to be as undisciplined as Bama for Florida to have a chance of winning. And I don't know if Georgia's shown that. Georgia is the best team in the conference when it comes to penalties. So it would need a very uncharacteristic performance. AR-15 will have to rush for 100 yards, says Andy Stell. I think all these things are what Florida fans would love to see if it can happen. I'm just not counting on it, especially not against this very disciplined, but also no-name, deep Georgia defense.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, I'll say that. I mean, it's, Florida's got some good athletes. They don't have a lot of them. 6 out of their first 7 games have been played at home this year, which is pretty wild. They played 1 game away from Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, and that was against Tennessee. Didn't turn out too good for them. But they, Florida's got some athleticism, and Florida's got some size, and it's kind of sprinkled in a little bit. Reminds me a little bit of that, 2016 Georgia team that, wasn't a very good team, but could kind of rise up and maybe swing back at you a little bit if it came focused and ready to play. And, I think Florida's kind of battling some of that as well.
Those guys almost lost to Nicholls State.
Yeah,
they did lose to Vandy.
And what do those 2 teams have in common? This Florida team and that 2016 Georgia team? First-year head coaches.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's one of the reasons I drew that parallels, because you're trying to change a culture. You're trying to do some things completely different. I mean, listen, I'd like to see Nicholls State team played South Florida this year, because Florida almost lost to South Florida at home. That Georgia team was weird though. I mean, they beat a pretty decent, top quarterback there in the first game of the season in the Georgia Dome. They beat a ranked Auburn team at the end of the year, but they lost to Georgia Tech, and they lost to Georgia's lost to Vanderbilt. So it was just a crazy season. But I do think that is one of the things that this team reminds me of, and I think that Georgia can get tripped up if it goes out there and plays real sloppy.
I think the big thing about Georgia versus this Florida team, and really it's been the story for Florida all year, is sort of so the way Anthony Richardson goes, so the game goes in a lot of regards. And if Georgia's effective at stopping him, then I don't think Florida has much of any chance, personally. Now, if he's able to get the legs loose, he's able to stretch plays out, they're going to give themselves a better position. And he's an incredible athlete, so that's possible. But I don't think that it's a situation where they've got enough guys around him necessarily to excuse, what's going to happen under center. And so really it boils down to the quarterback play. For that reason, I just don't feel very good for Florida's chances.
I got a couple questions here that I'll just take because I think the answers are we're going to have to wait and see. But Matthew C. asking if Jalen Carter will be back for the cocktail party. We haven't heard anything, and if I had to guess, we're going to hear the same Kirby Smart routine that we hear most weeks, is that we don't know yet, and we'll find out leading up to it. If I'm wrong, y'all jump in and correct me.
And if he needs a little more time, I say push him to Tennessee, man. I mean, if the kid's at 80%,
I mean, Georgia's done fine without him so far.
100 for the balls.
Let's see. Oh, Andy Stowe. This one was interesting. Who's a better play caller, Dan Mullen or Billy Napier? And I don't know if we've gotten enough, a big enough sample size on Billy Napier to figure that out yet. I think he's still trying to figure out how to navigate some situational play calling in the SEC. I think the end of that Tennessee game was a good example of that. But like Palmer said earlier, I'll admit I have not watched much Florida since that Tennessee game. Caught some of the South Florida game, caught some of the Utah game to start the season. But Florida kind of an enigma to me personally at this point in the year.
Well, being a great play caller does not a great head coach make. So I'm not saying that Billy Napier is not going to be a better head coach than Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's a better play caller. I mean, Dan Mullen hangs his hat on that. Dan Mullen got Florida to an SEC championship game with, pretty bad culture, without really all that, because he kind of put together an offense that was really, really incredibly tough to stop. Now, he picked the wrong quarterback like 3 times before he got to the right one. But, Dan Mullen's a really good offensive mind, really good play caller. I would take him over play. If you're just looking for an OC, I'd take him over Billy Napier. But then you got to consider the fact that Billy Napier actually likes to recruit. So it's a little more nuanced in terms of who you would want. But give me a game, plays to call, plays to, a game plan to put together, I'll take Dan Mullen.
I think if you could get 80% of the play caller Dan Mullen is, with 100% of the recruiter Billy Napier has been, I think a lot of Florida fans would settle for that.
That'd be pretty formidable coach. All right, let's wrap this up really quick tonight, guys. A lot developing in this game as the week goes on, so go ahead and hit subscribe, follow the show on our YouTube channel and on the podcast platforms if you're catching this on a replay. But let's jump into some dog stocks with what we know about Georgia right now. Stock up, stock down for you guys. I'll get the party started here. I'm going to say stock down on rest for this crew, but also for the Dogs. Obviously, the bye week was important for this team, but watching Kentucky, watching Tennessee, you know how good they are already, and Florida, of course, but also, you know, Mississippi State. I don't know if that's necessarily the tough game that we thought it was a couple weeks ago, but it's still on the road, so that doesn't really change my mind much, just based on what they did against Alabama at Alabama coming off that loss to Tennessee. So rest, stock down, not a lot of Z's around the Butts-Mehre building and the House of Pain for the Dogs. It is the home stretch, and it's time to figure out who this team really is.
Yeah, I'm going to go stock up on Georgia's schedule. We've, you know, like Palmer pointed out earlier, South Carolina's now in the AP poll. Oregon's looking good. You know, Vanderbilt and Missouri cannibalized each other over the weekend. Just two mules fighting over a turnip. It was really, really ugly. It looked like,
I'd rather watch that, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it looked like two deformed birds fighting over a worm. It was bad, but it was entertaining. And but so yeah, you got that, and then you got Tennessee. Obviously, you know, Tennessee gets another win. Kentucky, I believe, must have been off this week. I didn't notice them playing. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were. Can't remember. They've got Tennessee coming up. So, you know, they get a little more cannibalization in the schedule. And then, like you said, Wes, Mississippi State may not be as strong as we thought. Still, you know, going to be
still got those cowbells.
Yeah, still about those cowbells and that weird, you know, like you said, that weird stadium there in Starkville. So I think Georgia's overall schedule, not just the last 4 games, or not just those 4 games in November or 3 games in November, but those just overall, I think looks a little stronger today than maybe it looked 3 or 4 weeks ago.
I'll go stock down on our communication because that's exactly what I was going to say. Stock up on is Georgia's schedule. So in place of that, stock down on my golf.
I would say stock up. No, I'd say stock up on our ability to be on the same wavelength, Palmer.
Yeah,
Spin zone.
Stock down on my golf game. Not very good at golf.
Fighting over a turnip, that counts as entertainment in Atkinson County for sure. So let's. I'm going to go stock up on Fran Brown, man. Look at the cornerback room this guy has built in this 2023 class. First season with these Dogs. Really impressed with the job that this guy has done. I think that he's really knocked it out of the park. Georgia not missed on a lot of guys that they really zeroed in on in this group. Dare say that it may be stacking up right now with Glenn Schumann's insane haul at inside linebacker. You've got some really, really good players there. The lone 5-star commit, a guy who committed to Fran Brown in that cornerback room at A.J. Harris. So stock up big on Georgia's cornerbacks coach.
Uncle Glenn says stock up on DawgsHQ. I love that. Uncle Glenn.
Agreed.
Uncle Glenn is the fun uncle that always joins the show and gives you the candy that your parents say you can't have for Halloween. That's fun, Uncle Glenn. And stock up on Breaking Tea. We tell you about it every week, but the shirts are still there. They're not going anywhere. You definitely need a new one for this home stretch of the Georgia season. The link to Breaking Tea, complete with the NIL partnership on a few Georgia players here. The Mailman, Brock Bowers, Christopher Smith, and the Big O. Might be time to get a few new guys in there, Breaking Tea. We'll talk to them and see what they can do about that. But the shirts are still sweet regardless. The stock continues to rise on Breaking Tea. The link in the episode description of this episode on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Y'all subscribe. Leave us a kind review in the comments, no matter where you're watching or listening. We always appreciate you. All right, y'all. We will have much more on this channel later on in the week as we hear from Kirby Smart, hear from some Georgia players, and actually have some real substance to talk about here And maybe we'll get into some good old-fashioned Georgia, Florida memories from years past. I know we all have some good ones, some good stories, things we've seen from the game and from the fans themselves. It always gets a little wild down there in Jacksonville, guys. For the Jakes and Palmer, I'm Wes Blankenship. Y'all have a great week. We'll catch you soon.
Buckle up, Taco Lou.